Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Tensions are rising in Hungary ahead of crucial elections next week following an alleged sabotage plot targeting a key gas pipeline and growing claims of political manipulation. Joining us is Daniel Hegedüs. He's a Regional Director, Transatlantic Trusts Central Europe, to assess the situation and its implications. Daniel, welcome back to TVP World. Thank you for taking the time.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Good evening. Okay, so what do we have? We've got some high explosive apparently found near the pipeline which transports Russian gas through Serbia into Hungary, and this explosive was found on the Serbian side of the border. What are the implications both from the Hungarian side and also from the Serbian side?
Yes, I think it's fair to state that it's a pretty interesting situation because a couple of days ago, information was leaked by Hungarian experts and Hungarian independent media that such a false flag operation can occur against the mentioned Turk Stream pipeline that delivers natural gas through Bulgaria, Serbia, and Hungary, actually on the Serbian territory close to the border. And it was clearly interpreted as a potential false flag attempted terrorist attack that could actually support the campaign of Hungarian Prime Minister Orban and boost his support ahead of the April 12 election. Practically with that leaks, this operation was uncovered and unveiled. And it's pretty impressive and astonishing that despite of this unveiling, actually the perpetrators decided to proceed with the operation. On the Hungarian side, the immediate consequences were that the Hungarian section of the Turk Stream pipeline was put under the protection of the Hungarian military forces. And actually Hungarian government representatives immediately accused Ukraine as a potentially involved actor in this attempted sabotage or terror act, which is very interesting that actually on the Serbian side, obviously President Vučić informed the Hungarian authorities, but very soon actually the press spokesperson of the Serbian security forces actually refuted claims that any information would be available that could hint on a potential involvement of Ukraine, practically undermining actually the Hungarian government narrative from the very beginning. Obviously, the question whether it can have an impact on the upcoming elections and the potential support for the competing parties.
I'll come to that in just a second, Daniel. If you just pause
Sure.
for a second, please, because before we get there, I do want to ask you something else. Now, we've got a situation where the Serbians are saying, right, Ukrainians had nothing to do with it, but Orban is insisting that this is part of a sequence of events which link Ukraine determined to disrupt energy supplies to Hungary. Now, he's saying this without any evidence whatsoever. What's his thinking? How's he making this claim? And why isn't anybody saying, well, hang on, show us why you're saying this?
As you mentioned, the Hungarian authorities are using the example of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which was allegedly also destroyed with potential Ukrainian involvement, and they are using these parallels. And as you mentioned, in an absolutely unsubstantiated way. On the other hand, I think we can't claim that there is no international pushback, because actually larger part of the international public practically characterized and labeled this operation as it was a very desperate attempt, a false flag operation on the part of the Hungarian government, potentially in collusion with Russian intelligence services. Obviously, there is also no potential information that could substantiate these claims from the European and Western allies. But if we just ask the very simple question that must be asked in such situation, who can benefit, then obviously if the attack would have happened as Prime Minister Orban claims that was a Ukrainian involvement, obviously it would only support his campaign message in the Hungarian domestic political arena.
Okay, so now talk us through Orban's thinking on this. He blames Ukraine. How does that support his campaign?
Practically, the governing party Fidesz conducted an absolutely monothematic campaign focused on Ukraine and the potential threats posed by the Ukrainian administration to Hungarian energy security and also to Hungarian sovereignty. These claims are, again, unsubstantiated, and it's fair to conclude that they are also not working since the escalation in the bilateral relationship between Hungary and Ukraine early March, when Hungarian special forces kidnapped an absolutely legal Ukrainian money transport on Hungarian soil. We see that this Ukraine-focused campaign is not working. The scissor is opening between the electoral support of the opposition party TISA and the governing party Fidesz, but still Prime Minister Orban and the regime is sticking to this dysfunctional campaign strategy. I think it would require much more time to elaborate potentially why they are sticking to this, but we must see actually this further step of escalation in this context, that for them this election campaign is about Ukraine. And we have seen already at the beginning of March that they are ready actually to deploy measures of hybrid warfare in the election campaign. That was the hijacking of the Ukrainian money transport. And with this move, with this false flag operation, they went one step further. And we see actually how the logic of hybrid warfare is becoming entrenched in this campaign. And I think the main conclusion in that regard is that the very last days before the April 12 election, particularly Thursday, Friday, Saturday, will be extraordinarily sensitive, and the international partners must be prepared that potentially more will come.
Okay, but I mean, it doesn't seem to be working. I mean, the Hungarian population is generally supportive of Ukraine, and there is a big gap between Peter Magyar's and Orban's party, with Magyar, of course, being in the lead by, depending on the poll, 10% plus. 10 percentage points plus. So it's not working, but you say he's insisting on maintaining this message. What does he expect to happen?
I think we must see all these measures as signs of desperation. Potentially, we also need to interpret all of the international support to Prime Minister Orban from Russia, from the European radical right, and even the visit of US Vice President J.D. Vance tomorrow and Wednesday in Hungary as a desperate attempt to show international support to boost the support and the numbers of Fidesz. Actually, why it's not working, it's pretty simple. The Hungarian society is not supportive to Ukraine, but the Hungarian society largely is voting on domestic issues, bread and butter issues, economic issues. And this is where actually the Orban government lost its output legitimacy over the past couple of years. And they are not ready potentially to change strategy in the very last days. It's more or less understandable. Actually, the main challenge with all of these developments is that, particularly with these false flag attempts we started talking about, Prime Minister Orban demonstrated that he doesn't really have red lines when it comes to measures he's ready to take to remain in power. And against that background, the more desperate the domestic political situation for Fidesz is becoming, the more hopeless polling numbers are becoming for Fidesz, the larger will be actually the chance that they will try to use authoritarian measures to remain in power or potentially to influence the election outcome.
Okay, so in the last few minutes that we have left, Daniel, talk us through. I mean, we're not surprised that this, Orban has Russian advisors, as Peter Magyar is suggesting, but J.D. Vance actually coming to Budapest. What's that all about?
Yes, the Hungarian government invited actually US President Trump to visit Budapest in the autumn. And they have been counting on this visit as really the potentially highest level international support for Prime Minister Orban. Obviously, the Americans also see the numbers, and potentially President Trump wouldn't like to appear on the side of a potential future loser, but J.D. Vance is genuinely much more connected ideologically to the illiberal project of Fidesz and Prime Minister Orban, and he has also more domestically on the stake politically, because for him, actually, the politics in Budapest was a sort of blueprint, a politic he also would like potentially to implement in the future. And against that background, losing Orban as a winning model of illiberal politics in Europe will be actually a political loss for the MAGA movement in the United States. And of course, on the other hand, it will be also a political loss for the Kremlin in Russia. And of course, this is a move of political support. We could argue whether it's in the sphere of business as usual in party diplomacy, or it's an electoral interference. But certainly tomorrow there will be some strange events in Budapest. There won't only be a joint press conference organized between the vice president and the Hungarian Prime Minister Orban, but there will be also a joint mass rally. You can potentially also call that election rally scheduled for Tuesday afternoon, which clearly shows that the main goal of this visit is nothing else, just really to provide political support for an ally ahead of a very challenging electoral event.
Right. So, where is the EU in this dynamic as it's occurring, and we're so close to the election? Is there a role the EU is playing in this conversation? Very briefly, if you would, please.
Yeah, the European Union very wisely withhold itself from commenting all of these developments, because they know that potentially every questionable remarks or statements could be actually exploited by Hungarian government propaganda in the election campaign. The European politicians are crossing their fingers that actually Hungarian voters will solve their potentially biggest institutional challenge in the European Union. And the next Hungarian government will actually abandon that veto and blockade policy that characterized the Orban regime's behavior in the European Union over the past years.
Well, we'll be counting the days till the 12th of April and see what happens then. Daniel Hegedüs, as always, thank you so much for laying your analysis out for our audience. Have a good evening.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye. That brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away. News coming right up.